This podcast is brought to you by RX Smart Gear. Whether you're just starting out in your fitness journey or an avid workout enthusiast, a jump rope is one of the most essential pieces of equipment you should have in your workout arsenal, and I cannot recommend RX Smart Gear jump ropes highly enough. I've been using the RX Smart Gear jump rope for close to 10 years now. The quality, variety, customization are beyond compare. I actually did a workout yesterday with my first RX Smart Gear rope that I got almost 10 years ago, and it's still an amazing addition, still worked out great for the workout that I did. I love these ropes. Not only are they dedicated to constantly improving and challenging the community with their variety of ropes, but they're also dedicated to the education when it comes to their ropes and promote proper movement and technique patterns, which we of course love at Power Monkey Fitness. They've recently launched their new Frevo rope, which is made of a high impact polymer that can withstand up to a 50-pound dumbbell impact. With grippy handles and smooth transitions between drills, you cannot lose with this rope. Take your freestyle game to another level and visit rxsmartgear.com and order your rope today. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Mike Service, and on today's episode, we have Zack Height. Zack has been around the CrossFit community for a number of years, having competed at the regionals number of years ago, competed at a high level, amazing athlete, and now transitioned into being not only a coach, but also a coach in a space that was fairly new to him. He is into the calisthenics, handstand, gymnastics world and has become quite the resource for learning those movements. He has dedicated the last 3 to 5 years to becoming a master in a lot of these really niche spaces, and he has amassed quite a following on social media for being able to do some incredible skill development. Myself being a gymnast, being able to see someone come from a non-gymnastics world and see what someone like Zack is able to do is a testament to putting in time, putting in consistency, and seeing where it could potentially go. It was fascinating to see his transition from being an athlete, coming from a baseball world, into now being more of a gymnastics, handstand, mobility guru. But it's incredible. He has his Height Performance as the place where you can find more information. But we hope you guys enjoy this one, and we hope you guys learn something new about the calisthenics and gymnastics world. Well, Zack, thanks for taking the time to be with us today. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. It's a pleasure to be here. I've followed your stuff for quite a while through CrossFit, and exciting kind of meet you semi face to face.
Yeah, of course. And, you've been coming across my feed quite a bit recently. And then obviously we can get into you meeting up with Mike not that long ago at a handstand seminar. But I am a little bit curious about your background, because if you just look at your feed, you seem to be an incredible mover in terms of your mobility and your handstand and your gymnastics and your awareness. But it doesn't seem like that's kind of where you started. You had a pretty high level CrossFit background back in the day. And I'm just kind of curious, just give me a little insight into what your athletic background was before you kind of got to this point right now.
So origin story in 1,000 words or less, Zach. Go.
1,000. I have that many. Well, I had a pretty varied background, right? I had a big brother. And so just from like the earliest, as soon as I could walk, I was competing with him and just whatever was going on, right? He's like talking me into jumping off of things that are too tall and stuff like that. So just always moving. But formally, I got into baseball when I was like 5 years old and played that all the way up through college. I did a little stint of semi-fun gymnastics when I was like 7, 8 years old. And when they moved me to the competitive class, it was like super serious and it was going to take a ton of time. And my mom asked me if I wanted to pick either baseball or gymnastics, and I ended up picking baseball. So I had like a very slight introduction to gymnastics, learned some like back handsprings and just moving on some of the different apparatuses, but no formal training beyond that. So pretty much all of this gymnastic stuff that I do now, I've learned either through messing around with my buddies in the park, through CrossFit, or the last 3 years, like with formal coaching for handstands.
Amazing. And where did you grow up? I'm always curious when people did some formal gymnastics, where they grew up and what gym they attended.
I was born in North Carolina, and then I moved out to California with my family when I was 5.5. And so there was a gym out here called La Sisson Gym. I believe it's called Champions Gymnastics now. My niece goes there actually, and she's much better than I ever was at that age. So,
well, obviously, I was watching your videos and I thought you might have a gymnastics background, because there's a thing that non-gymnasts normally do, is just neglect lower half. what my legs are doing, it's not really a component. But you have a tendency to actually point your toes pretty well and
Pretty well,
be
thanks.
conscious of what. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like there's attention to detail there that tells me that this didn't just happen overnight. You know what I mean? Even if you spent the last 3 years working with whether that's Yuval or Ito or whoever else that's an expert in these specific fields, you have something that looked like it was part of your childhood as well. So those couple of years in gymnastics, I think, still stood out from what I was seeing in your movement patterns, which is really cool to see. Did those things that you remember, even if it was a short stint, translate into you feeling like you had a leg up in the CrossFit setting once you started to compete as a CrossFitter?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Especially back in the day, like 2011 and 12, nobody really had gymnastics, right? So like if I was going to go to a CrossFit competition that had handstand walking in it, like I could win that event. Like OC Throwdown, I think 2012, there was one workout that had double unders, GHDs, and handstand walking. And like I got first place, and there's like 10 guys from the CrossFit Games there. But that's not me being very good at handstand walking. That's just an indication of like where CrossFit was at that time period 11 years ago.
These are always but Dave, sorry, these are just always spark little memories. And like around that time, I was working with some really good CrossFitters in Ohio that were on like a games team. And even something like double unders was like a huge thorn in really good athletes' sides. So I can remember
that's real. The workout had like 3 sets of 75 double unders, and me and my training partner Gabe Subri, we just did like sets of 100 to warm up, or sometimes we'd see who could do more in a row. So 75 was like nothing for us. But back then, like 75 was like, oh my God, 75 in a row. It's so many. But yeah, now, like, I mean, that's nothing, right? That's just a break for people.
But the sport continuously evolves, right? So like what's commonplace now is very different than what happened 10 years ago. And now what's challenging are a lot of new things that Boz is starting to put in. I'm curious from your perspective, do you still follow CrossFit Games and programming and what's coming out in semifinals? And do you actually keep an eye on that at all anymore?
Games, but not like semifinals and stuff like that. I'll watch the games when this live stream, but.
Okay. So what we saw last year with Boz being the first time programmer, a lot of, in quotes, higher level gymnastic skills, more skills that we hadn't seen in the past. I think when we had Boz on the podcast, there was about 12 new movements that were introduced for the first time at the games last summer. It's a ton. And so a lot of athletes were pissed off. They were pissed off. Oh, I got to do double crossovers, or I got to do handstand pirouettes, or I got to do not a press to handstand, but a support to handstand and traverse, and all of these things that they had never had to work on before or never seen in a competitive setting. I'm curious from your perspective if you appreciate that introduction of higher skill development, starting to introduce what might be lower level, whatever it is, 3 and 4 in the gymnastics world, into these settings a little bit more to be able to really push the limits on what these athletes are able to do, rather than just saying, all right, give me some more double unders, just pump the intensity up a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic because I think these people doing CrossFit are better athletes even than they know. And I think by exposing them to these requirements, like they're just going to like show how fit they actually are by how fast they acquire these skills, right? Like the fact that in the middle of a weekend, they can, even with bent arms, like go from an L sit to a handstand, like just like on command, like that's not an easy skill to do for anybody, right? If you just go to the gym, you're like, oh, I'll try this. You'd be like, holy shit, that's hard. Like, and then imagine doing 7 CrossFit workouts before that and being in front of a crowd and being in the top 10 with like, everybody around you, like vying for the podium, like all of that together. And they're still like succeeding at it. Like that's pretty impressive to me.
Yeah. You have a pretty unique perspective on it. I completely agree with you. I remember back in the day, I don't even know how many years ago, it's probably over a decade by now, working with guys like Dan Bailey and Spieler when like the CrossFit content was first starting to get developed, going out to HQ and shooting some content with these supremely talented CrossFitters that had never done anything gymnastics. I just remember being like, hey, we're going to work on a straddle planche on rings today with Spieler. He's never tried this before. Let's see if he's able to do the movement. And, my gymnastics brain is, okay, this guy, he's a great athlete, but there's no way he's going to be able to do it. and first turn he does straddle planche with his shoes on rings. Like,
Jesus.
Fuck, like, how is this possible? Like, these athletes are, it's a level that really you don't see too often, where they're able to pick things up and make adjustments. And, a lot of it is compensation through just such a high level of strength. But there is a little bit more going on there with the level of awareness, because I think so much is thrown at these athletes that they have to just figure it out on the fly so quickly that they just become accustomed to molding. So I agree with you. And I love that sentiment that your perspective, having been a high level athlete and now seeing the skill development side of things, you're able to kind of put into play like maybe just a few people actually are.
Yeah, it's cool to watch, and it's cool to kind of have been part of it when someone at my athletic ability was able to compete, just because now the level is so high, and just watching it is impressive for sure.
And now that we got to get into this, we can shut Mike out of the equation, forget about lifting of barbells and cleans and jerks, and
I still like lifting. You wouldn't know it from my Instagram, but I still like lifting. Yeah,
it's gonna come up. I'm patient. I come in when time's right.
I'm sure you supplemented in there, and there are tons of values, blah blah blah, of lifting weights and all those things. But what made you transition away from competitive CrossFit, and what really resonated with you with bodyweight movement, handstand work, a lot of mobility work? What was the thing that really stuck out to you as this is where I want to spend my time moving forward?
Yeah, so that was like a long journey getting out of CrossFit and then getting into like full bodyweight training. So I kind of stopped competing in probably 2013 was my last big CrossFit competition. And I did some Olympic weightlifting up through like 2014 and 15. And then just kind of randomly pieced stuff together legitimately until like 2020, when COVID kind of shut down the gyms. And I was like, you know what, this is finally a good time to like really focus on like some of like the bodyweight training and calisthenics that I've always thought was cool, but just never put the time into developing. So I ended up hiring a coach from the Ido Portal method, and just, off to the races from there. My main thing for getting out of CrossFit was just pain. Like my back hurt constantly. My knees were in like a ton of pain pretty much every single day on every activity. Like even just getting off the toilet, I was having to use my hands, even though I was technically one of like the fittest people on earth. And like that was, after 3-4 years of that just nonstop pain where it's hard to sleep at night, I didn't want to do it anymore.
Zach, when you say that just makes me think of people that we work with that a lot of times, definitely CrossFitters too, come to work with Dave or myself to like almost bridge the gap from like competition to physical therapy. They're like, I don't want to like completely shut it down and just work with a PT. But at the same time, like I can't keep doing what I'm doing. And this is where I'm curious with you specifically. The thing that I've found is a lot of times people that came from like a very specific sport into CrossFit just completely jumped into like full volume training. So they were already very good at what they did. So they know how to work very hard. Yeah. And they just went crazy. And then oftentimes what I'll end up doing is like mixing their training a lot more and then toning the volume way down compared to what they were doing. So on that sense of like, where you went from baseball to CrossFit to where you are now, like what was the level of intensity you noticed from yourself?
Oh, it was pretty much full speed straight into it. I started at CrossFit 209. Like I mentioned, I was training with Gabe Subri, and so he had been to, I think that he watched the regional competition in 2009 and then was preparing for it for 2010, like when I first started there. So pretty much I was like entering a situation, like preparing to train people for the games, with no knowledge about like how to lock out my elbows on an overhead squat or like how to do a kipping pull up. We kind of just figured it out as we went. And like you said, with the athletic background, like doing a little bit of power cleans, a little bit of squatting from baseball, I had some knowledge about what to do with the barbell. So, I mean, obviously it worked out well enough. I was able to make it to the regionals a couple times, what have you, but I didn't have any like strength base. I'd never done like sets of 10 or anything like that to build up the connective tissue or just build up the muscles in my legs. So basically I was just doing full speed CrossFit. Every now and then I would max out like a power clean or a squat or a deadlift, and just like repeated that for several years. And, a testament to the power of CrossFit. Like I still got more fit, but just like my joints couldn't keep up with the pace of like the aerobics and the muscle power that was developing.
Yeah, I'm like, I guess throwing softballs at you for our listeners, just to kind of reinforce some things that seem to be common themes, which is one, I think the CrossFit community is eager for whatever you offer them. So like if you're only offering them high intensity and like just these crazy high standards, that's what they're gonna go for. But I think what we've noticed over the last 10 to 12 years is how eager coaches are to learn more about coaching. And then even like the most like quote unquote general athlete in the gym, how excited they are to learn like what's behind the method of what they're doing. So I know, like Dave, you can confirm this, I hope, when we go, to a gym for a weekend course, a lot of times the owners of the gyms or even the coaches are surprised at like what member comes to a course to learn from us. And it'll be somebody that like just comes to CrossFit 3 days a week, does the WOD and goes home. But when they see an opportunity to like, oh, I'm going to learn how to snatch, or like, I'm going to learn like all of the developing movements of the gymnastic skills that I'm too afraid to do, like they jump at it. And that's been something from our end that's always exciting to get into. But then listening to you talk, and I kind of assume that taking that same approach once you were given the opportunity, like sometimes a hard lesson, like pain maybe pushed you there. But then seeing that there's so much to learn, and then you don't have to like live and train in pain. That's not the only way.
Yeah. And I was like listening to like the anti-CrossFit podcast of what was the old podcast with Rob Wolf and Greg Everett? What was it called back in the day? But like, Rob had been kicked out of CrossFit, Greg had been kicked out of CrossFit, and they were speaking on periodization. I was listening to that probably in like 2010 and 11 as I was like ramping up my training and like starting to feel so terrible. But then also like feeling like I was good at CrossFit, so still doing it anyway because I wanted to be able to compete and have that opportunity. But as the pain developed so much, right, I had that informational knowledge in my head about like this thing called periodization, which I had no idea what it even was, right? Because like CrossFit was the opposite of that. Like you need to do something different all the time. So it's like a huge like maze that I walked through without any knowledge of even realizing I was in a maze, and kind of just like pieced my way eventually to like meeting good coaches and meeting other good athletes to kind of find a better way, and then understand that people have been doing this for a long time, right? And there's strategy to developing the human body, and it doesn't just have to be random.
So at this point, give us a little insight into what an average training day looks like for you, like in terms of amount of time that you spend and skill development. What are you actually working on, and what does an actual day of training look like for you?
The main goal is just one arm handstand, and I can do one now. So I kind of set that goal for myself in early 2020, and then hired a coach in June. So it'll be 3 years in June. So anybody out there considering starting one arm handstand, you got 3 fun years ahead of you. But a typical handstand workout's about 3 hours from warm up to finish. Stretch the hips out, get the shoulders open. I have a pretty tight thoracic spine, so I still need to spend some time loosening that up to have a good session. And then training, start with basic skills and shapes, and then move into my weight shifts, move to the finger supports, move to like the easiest one arm variations, and then kind of piece in harder ones depending on how I'm feeling for the day, and then finish with some type of conditioning, whether it's assisted holds or stuff on the wall to kind of get extra volume and build endurance where I'm not falling over. Typically, I'll start my mornings with like an hour of mobility, whether it's working on the thoracic mobility or working on the splits. I've started learning some dance also, so I'll have like an hour of dance lessons 2 to 3 times a week. I do some juggling, and it's big conglomeration, probably like 4 to 6 hours a day of movement, with the main focus being that like 3 hour handstand session 5 to 6 days a week.
You said that fairly nonchalantly, and I think if most listeners out there hear that, they're going to shit in their pants, saying you're doing 3 hours of
Yeah,
handstands a
people
day.
either don't believe me or they think I'm on steroids.
The
Or they're
handstand
like,
steroid
if they do handstands, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, all depending on who's listening. Now,
Exactly.
this is pretty critical, just to be able to understand some of the timelines. We always talk about, small incremental gains. It's all about baby steps, appreciating the process that comes along with it. And, you already had a background of a high level athlete, and you started out, being able to do handstand walks and probably a pretty sufficient handstand hold prior to taking on this one arm handstand journey. And it's been 3 years of spending, upwards of 20 plus hours per week working on solely handstands. And it took you 3 years to get to the point of being able to hold a handstand in one arm. Now, when you say you can do a one arm handstand, that's a pretty wide ranging thing to say. In your mind, what justifies saying you can do a one arm handstand? Is being able to hold for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, a minute on each arm? What to you is saying that I have a one arm handstand?
You've all told me I had it and I should practice some harder shapes. Yeah, I don't know. I have the goal of like 60 seconds the hard way, so 30 seconds on each side, before like I would be happy with it. And I think my best is 20 seconds per side. And not in the same set, but like that's my best. But I think when I get to that 30-second hold per side, I think I'll look at it and be like, my feet were wiggling, like I wasn't completely stable. Like, yeah, but it's not a straight, it's in a straddle, so that's easier. So I don't think I'll ever really be happy with the position. But that's kind of what I've fallen in love with the handstands, is there's always little increments to improve at. And it's not like weightlifting or CrossFit where like those main metrics are just speed and weight, which crush you, right? Like the detail and the beauty of the movement is the most important part to me of the handstand. And that's something I feel like I can work on for the next like 20 or even 30 more years.
I love it. And obviously the handstand is something close to my heart. And the man you mentioned, for the listeners out there, hopefully they listened to the podcast that we had recently with Yuval. But he is one of the living legends of the handstand world, having also been a very high level gymnast and performer. I'm curious about that connection and what gravitated towards you wanting to work with Yuval, and what you found to be kind of some of the things that resonate with you as him, just as a person and a coach.
Yeah. So I followed Yuval for probably several years now. And I just, appreciate the skill that he demonstrates and his training background and long history of coaching others. So, being a person who works online and has the ability to just work and take my laptop with me, I figured why not go to Germany? I've never been there before. It'd be a fun trip and get to learn in person from somebody who has, a really long history of teaching people like me to kind of like break through and get to the next level. And it did not disappoint. Just like the smallest little details about him shifting my hand, like literally centimeters, and my finger support. Like people who know me, if they saw my handstand like a week before that seminar and a week after it, like would not believe like how much better it got, just like from those like 3 cues that he gave me. It was bonkers. And I've had coaches for the last like 3 years, right, they're online, so obviously they're not in person and able to watch in as much detail, and not to like throw any shade at them at all, whatsoever, but like just like those small increments that Yuval was able to see specific to what I needed, was just incredible for sure.
I was certain that you were going to credit me for a lot of the moral support that I offered there as the fellow American participant in the course. But
no, but you reminded me of when I started, man, with like the tough mobility to get into a nice shape. Like, dude, if you just keep working at it, all it's going to do is get better, right? Like,
Dave
have
and Jordan are very happy with those comments right now.
Yeah, you have a much higher level weightlifting background than me, so like you're probably more athletic. So like, if you don't get the one arm, it's just because you didn't work hard enough.
That's a good point.
Well,
Dave,
the
I
thing is
wanted.
that Mike, if you just saw Mike, I'm going to give you a little love real quick.
Oh,
Just
thank you.
the level of increase in terms of what Mike's been able to do over the last few years with his handstands, and you can give credit to Yuval, you can credit to his wife Marie, who's a fantastic athlete in her own right. But Mike has devoted a ton of time, along with doing crazy amounts of squats and the lifts that he does. Doesn't do any CrossFit workouts, but you've been doing so many handstands lately that it shows. The position is much better. And if Zach would have seen your handstand from a year or two ago, it would have been quite the difference in terms of where you're at right now. So you are putting in the time. It deserves to be noted.
Well, I want again, listeners, I'm always trying to reconnect this to you, low to high level people, but it's cool to hear you too, Zach, talk about how much time you're spending right now. And then, I can only apply that to myself per se. So it's bare minimum now when I do handstands is what I would say is more beginner level. It's 60 to 90 minutes, nice, like minimum. And if I don't do that 5 to 6 times per week, then I notice like a flat line in any progress, even if it's just, awareness or something. But I think that's a good gauge for everybody that is listening is Dave preaches that constantly. Like you don't necessarily have to do just a handstand, but you have to do something every day if you want to start seeing progress like that. Like you have to invest into your skill. And it's then to see what the next level is, specifically in a handstand, like going to one arm handstand and then, all the crazy stuff that balancers do out there. But everything takes time. And this is just like our mantra to everybody. It's like you can look at what you want, but how much time, one, are you able to invest? And then two, are you willing? So yeah, like you said too, if I want to get a handstand, I just don't work hard enough if I'm not getting there.
Calling you out, yeah.
But that's true, and I think that's important for everybody to always think about. Even Dave, we'll do some other credit the other way. He comes from a long career of gymnastics and not doing enough leg training and having a lot of knee injuries and things. And I like to think when he dedicates a little bit more time to his squats and his legs, the body feels better. So kind of finding your areas of deficiency or where you haven't balanced yourself out for a long time and taking the time to do that to be a more balanced athlete, a more balanced human. And then Jordan, I know he was curious before we got on the call with you, is even though you're spending all this time on handstands, it does seem like when you go to play with some of your old skills or your old strengths, they're not so far away, or maybe not far away at all from where they were when that was all you were focused on. So what's that look like? Like you said, you still like, weightlifting, you still like the barbell when you have the opportunity to use it.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I think I spent enough time with the barbell where I learned it. So I don't think it's going to go away. I like, snatching 100 kilos is not a lot, but I think like if I wanted to snatch 100 kilos, I could probably do it in 3 weeks. Right. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be done. I might be able to do it today, but I probably hurt myself. But if I were to just, snatch up to 70 for a few sets, snatch up to 80 for a few sets, snatch up to 90 for a few sets, take a couple of days off and then snatch up to 100, I think it'd be completely fine. The movement patterns there, the flexibility is like far and away better than it's ever been. So I can be really efficient. Like if I watch my snatching now with a lightweight, I feel like the movement looks better than when I was snatching competitive weights a long time ago. So it's definitely an evolution. But I think when you actually learn a skill, like you keep it. I think if something goes away in 3 weeks and you're like frustrated, I don't think you ever had that skill in the first place. And I think you were kind of like living with this illusion.
Dave, what does that sound like to you? Because that makes me think of a lot of times, especially in weightlifting, I need to ask somebody what's your best snatch? What's your best clean and jerk? But I don't like that so much. So I usually will say like, if you had to right now, like what weight could you snatch on the minute for 10 minutes? Like that's the weight that we're going to gauge like what you're capable of. I don't care if you did something one time. So is that's something that you notice, Dave, even like, let's say in higher level gymnastic skills, like once you acquire a skill, is it the ability to repeat that and then it kind of stays for longer?
Well, I mean, like it's something that we see quite a bit with CrossFitters, the people that we work with who are struggling to do a muscle up, right? And then the open comes around and they're surrounded by 50 people in their gym when they complete their first muscle up, and it's a very exciting moment and everyone pats them on the back, and then they try to come back next week on their own and they can't understand why they can't do it. And again and again and again, it's because, like Zach said, they didn't really have a muscle up, just things kind of aligned correctly for their adrenaline to be at a point where they put them through enough pain to probably work through all the deficiencies of the actual movement pattern. So I completely agree with the idea that your body remembers. It probably maybe takes a little bit of time to get back to it. But the movement pattern is always there. And your body, if you do it enough times, your body will recognize what that goes through. Now, maybe for someone like you, Zach, it's a little bit different. Mike mentioned this to me when he got back from Germany after having worked with you, or having been in the session with you and Yuval, saying that you have a tendency to pick things up very quickly. And, you seem to be a unique athlete in the sense that, Yuval maybe gave you those 3 minor tips that had a significant change in your handstand. But you're an athlete that maybe is able to make those changes a little bit more quickly, or can understand things and apply them a little bit more quickly than maybe the everyday athlete. First, do you recognize that in yourself? Have you always been an athlete that's able to make a change from one turn to another relatively quickly in terms of the change that needs to be made?
It's a good question, because I've never really seen myself as a good athlete. I grew up playing baseball, and I had teammates who were very good athletes, teammates who, went on to play professional baseball, and like being around them on a daily basis and just watching how they pick up pitches and how they conduct themselves during games and in tough situations. I never really saw myself as that person. So what I was able to do with that in mind was just constantly focus and try as hard as I could. And so I think I just developed this ability to pay very close attention to what I was doing and maximize my skill level at every opportunity. And I guess that's the same thing as being athletic, but you've been around people who are like, you're an Olympian yourself, and you've probably been around other people that you're like, why am I even in the same room with this person? Like, they're just insane. Like, they're hungover right now. I know they were out and only slept like 30 minutes last night, and they're just crushing everybody in the gym no matter what. And so those are the people, not that that's like a good way to live your life as an athlete. But those are athletes, right? Like, there are some people who just can. And like, I'm certainly not one of those people. And I think I've just developed this like ability out of like frustration and wanting to compete and being competitive, to just really pay attention and like force my body to do what I want it to.
So first part of what you mentioned, have I been around athletes like that? 1,000% yes. Like so many of the athletes at every stage of my career, I've been around athletes that have been not just better than me technically and just base talent level wise, but you get across some of these guys at the highest level that are just like, what you were born with is just something special. Just a few guys at Olympic Training Center. A couple guys that come to mind, Jason Gatson, 04 Olympian silver medalist, one of the most talented guys I've ever seen in my entire life. Could, do any skill, any event you ask of him. Paul Hom, another one, just picks up things and was able to technically, and you're just watching, you're like, I'm not that person. I am not able to do the same gymnastics that this person is. So what do I need to do? I need to rely on something else. I need to rely on some other form of what I have inside of myself to be able to make up for that gap. And I think that's what you're talking about, Zach, is the idea of, I need to pay attention. I need to focus on the detail a tiny bit more, so that I can make up for what this gap might be in terms of, just God-given talent. And it sounds like maybe Mike was witnessing that, right? Mike was witnessing your attention to detail between your turns. And it's impressive. You know what I mean? It's not something super easy to do, especially with 3 hours of training per day. Your mind can wander a little bit. Now, the everyday athlete out there is not going to have 3 hours a day. And you said 3 hours just on handstands, right? You mentioned 4 to 6 hours, an hour of mobility, dance lessons, all these other things they have going on to kind of supplement. if you were to give the everyday athlete out there, an average CrossFitter or someone who's just trying to improve their handstand, something that they could actually implement that is actually feasible for them. Say they have kids, they have a full-time job, they're not an athlete, they go in for their hour per day. Can you give a couple things that you would recommend them focusing on within an hour of training that would be best time spent, that is a good starting point for maybe where you kind of kicked off your journey?
Yeah. So like I've had clients who developed handstands working on it twice a week. It develops more slowly, but like only twice a week working on handstands and then working on mobility or muscle ups the other days in their sessions. So like it doesn't take the amount of time I'm putting into it to learn a handstand. I'm trying to get to a different level, not perform in Cirque du Soleil, but that's the people who inspire me. That's like the level that I want to work towards. So I'm working at like an uncommon amount of time for this stuff. But for the everyday athlete who wants to improve with the handstand, I would say more than thinking about how much time available, it'd be more about assessing where they're at with it and checking out their mobility and making sure they have full shoulder flexion, making sure they can get their elbows locked out and get into efficient position. Because all you're going to do if you start training these skills without good position, it's going to be the same thing as like training CrossFit without knowing how to squat well. You're just going to do more work in a bad position and hurt yourself. So the biggest piece of advice I could give is just like take care of mobility first, and whatever you're working on, make sure that you can get into those positions without pain and go from there.
I love that, Mike. That sounds like our shapes, man.
Yeah, we have, Dave has this kind of like hierarchy of I'll say hierarchy of needs for gymnastics and movement. And then the longer that I guess I'm in the teaching and coaching environment, like positional awareness and then patience within that seems to be what allows for people to make progress. But even I think more important than make progress is enjoy the process. Yeah. So like you were saying, like you pay attention a lot to these small details, but I think when that becomes like a fun game for you as an athlete, it doesn't really matter what skill you're working on, or like in weightlifting, it doesn't matter what percentage you're working at. You're so hyper focused on like little repeating a feeling as it looks to you, and then repeating a weight to have it have the same like sound and timing and tempo. Those are things that I think you actually can learn. So like when Dave talks about some of the gymnasts that are just otherworldly, some of them have that, and some of them are just freaks, because there's so many weightlifters that I trained with and competed against that were maybe a mixture of both, but we're just freaks. Like just to go with your, Dave, your stories of some of these guys that would just do crazy things. There were two weightlifters that I knew really well that they bombed out of a national competition. So they made none of their lifts. The next morning, they did more in their snatch in sandals than they did in their weightlifting shoes. And it wasn't because they did it wasn't because it was like a low amount. It was because they're just that good. They just had like a bad day where they probably weren't focused. And then they just turned it into a game the next day. Like, oh, I wonder if I can do more than I missed all of them yesterday in my sandals. But in that sense, like they weren't even thinking about it. It was just a game. They just wanted to see what they could do. So I like taking all the opportunities though, for if you don't have that, like you're just not the freak athlete. And most of us are not, the ability to then be hyper aware and find the beauty and the fun in making these adjustments and then repeating and mimicking. It's like, yeah, it's a game changer, because you have that self-awareness to be hard on yourself when you need to be hard on yourself, and then like celebrate the small victories.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool process. Kind of like what we're leading towards here is that you can make your body do what you want it to. And it's like, you hear stories about like Wim Hof can change the temperature of different parts of his body just like by thinking about it. And it's nowhere near that level of control, but it's like a similar idea of like, I want to do this thing. Here's what I need to do to make it happen. 6 months from now, like my brain is rewired in such a way that I'm literally a different person because I have chosen to do so. Right. And it opens this whole world of possibility of like, people say if you want it bad enough, you can do it. Like you literally experience yourself making that the truth. And so then it's like, well, what else can I do? What other avenues can I explore? And like I mentioned the dance thing, and I tell everyone I'm doing dance classes now. I'm like terrified of dancing. Just like my entire childhood, like biggest fear, like someone asking me to dance, like I'm gonna freak out and like not even try and just be afraid. And so it's like, well, if I can learn a one-arm handstand, like learning some basic like salsa steps can't be that hard, right? So it's just, for me at least, like it's opened up this whole world of like, what else can I learn? And the learning process is just so thrilling to me. I'm just like a nerdy learning person now.
Dave, did you have the thought, and Zach, are you familiar with Tosh? I'm not just
Tosh Point O, the comedian?
No, not Tosh Point O.
Brian Chantosh.
Yeah, Brian
No,
Chantosh.
I don't think so.
So he's a former he was a Navy SEAL, right, Dave?
No, he was a Marine.
He was a Marine. Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So he was a Marine. He just did a.
Oh, is he the guy who like ran inside a shipping container for 24 hours straight or something like that? Okay. Yeah, I heard about that.
He just rode with a bunch of Navy SEALs across the Atlantic recently, and we had a talk with him. But what you said reminded me of something that he said, where we were asking him like his motivation for doing all these crazy things, and he was talking about like going outside that sphere of comfort that you have.
Yeah.
And while he was saying that, I never got the chance to ask him, but I wanted to ask him like, well, what about something like dancing or doing something that would be like your like a sphere of embarrassment comfort? Because he's obviously tough enough, and that just when you said that about dancing,
like I wonder about that too for those people who are really tough, like David Goggins. Like, at what level do these extreme physical endurance things actually become more comfortable than just sitting on the couch, right? Because like sitting on the couch for these people who love this stuff has to be torture. So like, is this endurance stuff actually hard for them? Obviously it's painful. But like as an athlete, pain is not a bad thing, right? Pain is just part of the process. And like, you can fall in love with that as much as anything else. So I'm curious, like, I don't know any of these people personally to ask them, but like, would it be harder for you to like binge watch a Netflix series than it would be to run 200 miles?
I like that challenge.
An interesting question. Yeah. There's an obsessive or an addictive component to it too, right? Yeah. For athletes at a very high level, whether it's CrossFit or any Olympic sport or whatever you're doing, there's this kind of need to do it. This is where I feel most like myself. This is where I can express myself in the way at the fullest that makes me feel like I am who I'm meant to be. So I remember I maybe even mentioned this on a podcast at some point. Prior to the Olympics in 2008, I was on I guess it was a podcast for NPR, and they were asking me all these questions, and this woman called in and she just said, I don't like listening to Olympic athletes talk because, or athletes at any high level, because they all seem to be obsessed, and that level of obsession is not healthy. And I kind of paused for a moment, and I was like, well, there is some reality to that there is a level of obsession, but you can kind of frame it however you want. For me, it was a level of passion in the same way that maybe is for you, Zach, when it comes to these movements, or maybe weightlifting with you, Mike. And it allows me to kind of discover things in myself that I deep down think are in there, and can slowly pull them out as skills develop, or as I coach someone through something that they didn't think they had in themselves. And to me, that level of, if someone wants to call it obsession, I'm totally fine with it. Back then I took it as kind of a negative, but at this point I'm like, you know what? I'm actually okay with that. I'm okay with it, because to me, it doesn't really have to mean a negative thing. It can still be a positive in terms of what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I would say that like, if you want to get good at something, like, you're going to have to be obsessed with it. There's like really no other way to like spend that amount of time, because if you're not, like, just to be literally that disciplined to like force yourself to do something you hate every day long enough to get good at it, like, I would commend that person. There's like an old story with Arnold Schwarzenegger on he was on the Tim Ferriss podcast, I believe, and he was talking about how like he wasn't disciplined. He just liked working out that much. Like, he volunteered for tank duty because there was no supervisors around, and he could hide dumbbells under the undercarriage and get out there before anybody and get a pump, and then hide them back under there and just get extra work done because he liked it so much. And so like, that's kind of what the handstand has turned into for me is like, it's hard to take a rest day. Like I'm on like my 7th day when I'm not supposed to be doing anything. And I'm like, find myself like having to just like occupy myself and keep myself busy. So I'm not training even more.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think all of us strive to find something that we love as much as maybe each of us individually love the career paths that we've been able to kind of turn our sports into. And I feel really fortunate about that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel fortunate that my obsession has turned into a career and allowed me to help other people and continue to strive for new little pieces in terms of what I can find within myself. So I love that. I think it's something that all of us kind of are looking for. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's people that haven't found it that look at it as a negative and say, damn it, why have you found yours and I haven't found mine? But it's a continuous journey. You know what I mean? And maybe it changes along the way. You know, maybe your one-arm handstand is along the path to something else along the way that you haven't found out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm kind of starting to explore a little more like planche training, a little more strength work right now. So like that might be pretty fun to kind of look back on at this point, 2-3 years from now. Hopefully still getting better at the one-arm handstand, but then layering on some more skills, increasing flexibility, and learning through the process so I can kind of translate this to my clients that I work with along the way.
All right, one more quick question, Mike. I'll let you jump in. When you mentioned planches and continuing higher level gymnastics, if there was a gymnastics adult network for competitive purposes, would you ever want to pursue? You seem like a very competitive guy, and obviously you're pursuing things at a high level. Would you ever consider competing in an adult gymnastics competitive series if there was one?
I think I'm done competing. I think I like working out for me now. It's a lot more peaceful. I am competitive. I think I realize more and more as I get older how competitive I was back in the day. Just from like a mental standpoint of like keeping me awake at night, like thinking about trying to beat this person, or like so and so thinks they're more fit than me, or just whatever. Or like a ball I missed. Like I still remember like plays that I fucked up when I was in high school or college. So I think for me, at least now, like learning to just enjoy exercise for the process is a direction that I would probably stick with for the rest of my life. Support others who want to get after it and win awards and kick people's asses.
If you do change your mind on that, Zach, I have a guy that I work with. He wanted to get his legs stronger, but he's in an adult gymnastics league in Switzerland.
Okay.
Next time you're over here, I'll send you over there to train with
him.
But
okay.
I sent a video.
I'm going back in August. I'll be in France, so I'll stop in.
Perfect, because I was so excited to send Dave this video. I said, "Hey, you got to see what my new client does," and it was swinging rings. And swinging rings, it doesn't exist in the Olympics anymore, and it's the most wild thing. And
is it like a trapeze kind of deal?
Yeah,
a little bit, yeah.
Trapeze, yeah.
And this is
okay.
You know, like not a professional gymnastics league by any means, but for whatever reason, they kept this in play for the adult gymnastics men's in Switzerland, and it is terrifying to watch.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want a new skill, new challenge, then
perfect. Yeah, sign me up. I'll give it a shot.
Mike, I saw you give a fist pump when he said he's not looking to compete anymore. Yeah. Why did you do that?
Yeah, if you're just listening to the podcast, you didn't see my fist pump. I don't know. That's a topic that I'm super interested in right now, and I don't get to talk about very often. But like, having been somebody that spent their whole life being competitive and identified as how successfully competitive I was in whatever sport I was doing, I find myself on the complete other side of it now, where I completely identify as like a coach, teacher, friend, like whatever. And I almost avoid anything competitive now. So not to say that you're avoiding competitive things at all, Zach. It was just when you said like you don't want to compete anymore. Occasionally that little bug will pop up in me. A lot of times it's when I see somebody doing something that I think I could probably do if I just practiced it a little bit, or something I used to be able to do that I would like to see if I can again. But then I guess the question I would have for you, and this is personally motivated, as I have become less competitive, I guess, or less focused on being competitive, I think I've become a much more attentive, like, person. I like to listen to people more. I like to coach people much more. If I miss a workout or take a 2-hour break in a workout session because somebody wants to talk about something and learn something, I'm happy to do that. Whereas that, I mean, through my 20s, even after I was retired from weightlifting, my early 30s, I still wouldn't have wanted to do that. I would have been felt very inconvenienced. So I guess, for you, have you seen that as a shift in coaching and just interacting with people in general?
Yeah, it makes it more about other people and less about yourself. And I think that's something really important when you read books about perspective and how to live your life in a quality way. I think that's like a common theme of helping others is like a more fulfilling way to live your life. And so, like, one of the main drivers of my pursuit of these higher level skills is to force myself to be always in this uncomfortable position of learning. That way, if I'm teaching a client like an air squat and they can't do an air squat, I'm not like, God, this person's so inathletic. It's like, oh man, I know what it feels like to like be trying to figure out something and feeling like it should be simple and failing at it. Like, this person must be so frustrated. How can I help them? And I think for me, like, that's the way I want to progress my life as I get older, rather than just like only catering to the most athletic or only having time for my own skill development or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. Especially, I remember, I think I had a little shift as a coach. There was a point in time where there was a relatively beginner athlete that came to one of the gyms that I was working at, and they had left another gym because the weightlifting coach there said that they didn't have any potential to become a national competitor or world competitor and didn't, want to waste the time on them. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty horrible thing to say. But then I kind of put that on myself. I was like, well, I kind of do like to work with like the best people. Like, it's fun because then that can reflect on how you look. But seeing how they acted and how like down they looked, I was like, oh, that's horrible. So that's been a fun shift for me personally. And then to be able to see within our whole kind of Power Monkey network is, I mean, we have the whole array of people that we get to coach and interact with and teach, but sometimes the most fun athletes are the ones that, I had a guy that couldn't do an overhead squat for over 3 years. He took weekly weightlifting classes with me, and it was the most difficult coaching experience of my life because he didn't stop coming. So I had to like keep figuring things out, and it was helpful for me. And I hope everybody's not annoyed with my monologue, but what you said about wanting to keep learning and stretching your learning helps you to be a better coach. Coming to that handstand workshop at Uval, like, I should have went to the beginner session and I went to the intermediate advanced because Marie wanted to, and I wanted to do it with her. But it was very humbling to really just see everybody, even people that were struggling, but still be able to do a lot of things. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is going to take me minimum another year, like, to practice to be able to do those things. But at the same time, it was a good feeling to have that of like, oh, there's still so much to work on, and be kind of refreshed with that feeling of like, yep, I have a lot to do. And if I want to, I can.
You have incredible opportunities ahead of you.
Yeah. So framing is that, and again, back to anybody that's listening, if you're a coach, like how you word things and frame things are very important. And as an athlete, like, instead of talking about what you want to do and what you can't do, like, talk about what you are doing, or focus about, on what you are doing. So I like these types of discussions that can kind of open.
I think this stuff is it's tough to explain to athletes when you only have them in a CrossFit class for an hour a week, right? You have to get the warm up, do the workout, send them home, get the next class going immediately. But I think kind of understanding these deeper perspectives about why you're doing the training, what does the training mean to you, is what makes you keep training for 5, 10, 20 years. And that's how you stay healthy and fit, right? You can be an incredible high school athlete, but then if you get a job and eat Doritos the rest of your life, you're going to be having a heart attack at 45. So I think the mental aspect is the physical aspect, right? It's not as important as a physical aspect. I think it's all the same thing, right? And when you leave it out, it just makes a unstable structure.
Preaching.
Yeah, I mean, I love this stuff so much, and it's all I think about. And it's just like, I mean, we could probably sit here for like 3 days just talking about different perspectives on it. But I think having the right mental approach and then understanding the mental approach can change, right? It can evolve over time and new things can become important, or the same thing can be important for like a series of reasons that changes throughout your life. It's fun process to go through. And I love going through it myself, and I love seeing my clients go through it as well.
I just we finish up real quickly. I would love to continue the conversation, but I want to respect your time as well, Zach. But just something you said, Mike, I just wanted to build on a little bit, because you said, and maybe you misspoke, or maybe you can just elaborate on it, but you said you normally enjoy working with high-level athletes.
I said I used to.
You used to, okay.
Yeah.
I have found over the years, having coached high-level athletes, that it's sometimes my least enjoyable group to work with, because there's almost a necessity for them to be there, and not, in some cases, not a love anymore. And it's almost like, this is my career, not my love, or I feel like I have to do this. The reason for doing it sometimes changes when you become a professional athlete. And that's not to say that it happens all the time, but the thing I've loved the most over the last decade plus is spending time with athletes that have found these things later in life, where it's like a light bulb went off and they didn't grow up with doing handstands or getting inverted or, swinging on rings, and they're like children again. You get kids at 40 years old saying, "Oh my God, this is amazing. This is so much fun. Can teach me whatever you got, throw it at me. I want to learn. Whatever time I have to develop here, I want to be here. I want to be present, and I want to learn." And to me, that's so refreshing. It's not about taking someone to the Olympic Games. It's about seeing those small incremental changes and someone be really diligent about it, and be, fall in love with the process in the way that we've been talking about. So for the listeners out there listening to all of us say we've competed and we've trained at really high levels, that's not necessary for this conversation. It's just a byproduct of the time that's put into it. The real joy for me as a coach, and I'm sure it is for you guys too, is to work with people that truly love these things and to truly want to see that sense of bliss when they get their first 10-second handstand hold, turn it into a 30-second, turn it into a minute, and just understand that, wow, I actually did that because I appreciated the process. So all listeners out there, it's all possible for you. It's all possible. And I think Zach probably said it best when he said, it's just about being obsessed in some cases and putting the time in. Maybe you don't have 3 hours, 6 hours, but start out a couple days a week. Start out with an hour. Be diligent about it. Make sure you're working on the mobility, and I guarantee you're going to start seeing those changes. So there's my monologue for you before we finish up.
No, Dave, you and then we'll let Zach chime back in. We just dominated for a second, but that's how inspiring.
No, go ahead. I don't have any monologues to go right now. I'm glad you guys are covering.
You're inspiring a lot of thoughtfulness, because Dave, no, I would agree 100%. A lot of times the highest level athletes or the professional athletes are more difficult. And I don't even think it's because they want to be difficult. It's just they feel urgency. And I'm sure you had that same feeling, because when I think about it, when I think about how I reacted towards a lot of my coaches, when I had like very strict goals that were like, no, by this time I need to do this. So like I would be frustrated with myself, and I would be frustrated with whoever was helping me for not seeing things fast enough. Whereas, when we get to people that are like, I would like to learn this as efficiently and quickly as possible, but I'm also okay taking as long as it needs, because I know it's a process that it's like telling somebody like, you need to love me in the next week or else we're going to break up. It's like, well, that's kind of doomed for failure. So that's what it can be a lot of times with higher level athletes from my experiences too.
Agreed. Before we get you out of here, Zach, are you cool to answer a couple of quick, hard-hitting questions from us?
Sure, yeah. Throw them at me.
Remember, Dave did say he was on NPR, so that's where he's coming at you now. Now we're getting
exactly. What sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Handstands.
I'm putting that into gymnastics category.
Gymnastics, yeah, gymnastics. If I could only do one, like you don't need equipment for it. It's much easier on the body. But there is something nice about the feeling of a snatch. Clean's too heavy, but snatches are nice.
I'm probably right there with you, Zach. And Dave, it's like not even fair to ask this question anymore if Chad's not on here, because I invest so much more time in handstands and gymnastics movements than like my own personal weightlifting. But with that being said, I will watch weightlifting as a sport for hours upon hours still. Like it's still so beautiful.
Those old Bulgarian training videos with Zlatan Vanev lifting in flip-flops back in the day, like all of that.
Anything. I mean, I love watching gymnastics too, but like it's this, you can watch a snatch over and over and over again from 100 different people. And it's just incredibly interesting to see the small little changes from it. So I just wanted to plug that in.
That's why you do what you do, Mike. That's why you do what you do.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath, and I'm going to get another point in my category. So thank you for that one. I'm going to take
you've been
gymnastics
on a new role.
Well, yeah, I'm in a good place right now for sure. Question number 2. Any person that you come across recently or someone that you know that might be a good interview for us, someone that might be good to have on the podcast? This is always a tough one, kind of on the spot. So if you don't have one, no worries.
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, I listen to a lot of like Lex Friedman, and he's talking to these like computer scientists, like super intellectual people that hopefully I learn a little bit from, at least about how to think. So I don't really, gosh, I wish I had someone to like throw at you guys, but I don't have anyone.
I would love to get Lex Friedman on.
Oh, that would be awesome if you could get Lex on. Yeah, like, fantastic. He's a BJJ guy. He's into fitness. Like
Jordan would have to lead that one.
Fantastic conversation.
Jordan's the BJJ guy, so that could maybe be our in.
And there's my recommendation. Get Lex if you can.
I love it. He's my my 30 minutes to work every morning listening to Lex. So
nice.
It's been a soothing, sometimes terrifying ride to work when he's talking about
all the AI stuff taking over,
predicament that we are in with where ChatGPT is going. But,
I feel like his eternal hopefulness and optimism though helps with a lot of that, because no matter what,
his guests always set him straight, and they're like, actually, this is very dangerous.
But
actually, that's not the case.
Mike is very much in the same vein as Lex, just being like, if we just put enough of love out into the world, we're all going to be okay, even when singularity happens.
Yeah,
we'll be okay. Yeah. We'll be okay.
We'll figure it out.
Figure it out. So, Jordan, get on that. Get Lex out. Don't worry about even the podcast. Just bring him out to camp, and we'll do a live podcast at camp. See if we can make that happen. That would be nice. Last question for you. Any book? I don't know if you're a book reader. Any book you've read recently that you'd like to pass along? And if not, maybe a TV show or a movie that you've seen that's worth checking out. Man's
Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Was that German inspired from your last trip?
No, I read it quite a while ago. And man, like any time that you're feeling like the world is against you, or that you're facing some challenges, like, and you need some perspective, like that will give it to you. It's not light reading. It's an account of him spending time in a concentration camp and the things that went on, and his perspective about how he was able to get through it, and the perspective that the other people who were able to get through it had versus the people who did not. And he talks about the people who didn't get through it. And it's powerful. It's powerful. And I think that for many reasons, on top of just historically, just remembering that humans can do stuff like that to each other, I think that's a book that everybody should read for sure.
Oh, that's on. Yeah, I think every generation should have to read that for so many layers. But like, I think maybe that's how you felt. Like, if you don't finish that book and then feel a mission to try to have more empathy for others,
right, yeah,
then you I don't know, you need something strong.
Somehow, something.
Yeah, because
read it again.
Yeah, that's like that could be like a yearly read. That thing's amazing.
Awesome. Zach, thank you for the suggestions there. Before we get you out, what do you got coming up? Where can people find you? Where can our listeners follow along with your handstand journey?
Find me on Instagram at Zack Height, ZackHeight. Gonna be traveling around a bit the rest of this year. Another workshop with Yuval in France in August. and then spending some time probably back down in Miami Beach and a little bit in Cancun for another handstand workshop down there. And considering if people might be interested in that sort of thing, perhaps starting to do some like destination retreats sometime around this time next year.
Fantastic, man. Well, we're going to be following along. Thank you for all the great content and for the wisdom when it comes along to this amazing journey that is the handstand, and good luck to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. And for all the listeners out there, please be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. You can check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Mike Service. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your hosts. I'm Dave Durante with my co-host Mike Service. And until next time, thank you all for listening.